All right, welcome back. So we're going to do the HTML that's going to go inside of this password dialog, just so that it looks more like a dialog than what's there. So going over to the HTML, and what we're going to do first is we're going to start putting some of the things into this dialog. So if you go hop back over to Angular, and you learn a little bit more about dialogs. So if you scroll down in this area, you can see that they've got a dialog title. They've got dialog content. They've got actions if you want actions. And then there's also this dialog close attribute. What you notice about this is that two of these things are attributes. So the dialog title is actually an attribute, which is interesting. It's not a tag, it's an attribute. And dialog close is also an attribute. So you can put this on a button to make it close the thing. So let's use some of that knowledge to make some of these HTML elements. So what I'm going to do first here is I'm going to make an H1 with an attribute of a MD dialog title. So that's just a little bit different than what you might have guessed. And I'm going to make the title say add a new password. And then I'm going to close up the H1. After that, I'm going to go ahead and do my MD dialog content. To be honest, I don't think these classes really do that much, but if they exist, I'm going to use them. I'm also going to have an area for my MD dialog actions. Looks good. Now I'm going to start putting some things in here. I'm going to stub this one out and just say stuff here for now. And then for my actions, I'm going to put some buttons. So I'm going to have two MD buttons. And remember, they could be raise buttons, they could be icon buttons. I'm just going to use a standard button for now. And then because it's like beat into me to go ahead and specify the type, I go ahead and say type equals button. You can totally get away without doing it. And our first button here is going to be a cancel button. And then our next button is going to be a save button. So I've got cancel and save. All I want cancel to do is just to close it. So there's actually an attribute I can use for that. It's just MD dialog close. So if I just wanted to close it, I can just add that and it'll close it. And then save, what I'm going to do is, well, I'll do some more with save later. So save right now is just going to do nothing when you click it. Enough here that we can go try things out. So now when I hit on the plus button, it says add a new password, stuff here, and it says cancel and save. To be honest, cancel and save look terrible. So something's got to be wrong. And it's because I mistyped MD button. That said MB button, which is nothing. Now I click on it again, and now it looks kind of like a save and a cancel like I expected. So things are going good. To be honest, there's things I want to fix. One thing I want to fix is I want to fix the font of the title. Kind of surprised by this, but the title didn't even default to the right font. So I'm going to have to add some CSS. So I come over to my CSS, and I'm going to add some things. And what I really want to add to is I just want to add to anybody that has the attribute MD title. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, hey, match anybody that's got the attribute MD title. And I'm going to do some things to you. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the font family. The font family should really be Roboto, which is really all you have to say. In general, it's nice to have a backup font, and so just in case they don't have Roboto, which they will, we'll use this certain version of Helvetica, and if they don't have that, use a sans serif. So very overcautious there, so I've given you two backup plans. The font size, it was too small for me by default, so I'm going to make it 24. The font weight, I'm going to go with normal just because in general I'm not a big bold guy. The color, instead of making it perfectly black, I'll make it a little bit faded, so 444. And then I'm also going to give it some padding, and then I'll see what it looks like. So I gave it a little padding on both sides. So save that up and see what our changes look like. And that looks like something I can live with, right? So add a new password, and then it says stuff here and there. Cool, so the next thing I want to do is I want to start fixing up the stuff here. And so I'm going to start adding some inputs into this area. And so the question is, how do you do inputs? So you come over to Angular Material and you learn about inputs, right? So this habit of like learning about using the documentation is very useful. So here's a material to input. So you can just go and copy some from that guy. And that's all well and good. It's a starting point. So it says input should be in MD input containers. They should have an attribute MD input. Whenever I see things like this, where this is camel case and everything else is spinal case, I can tell it's going to change, right? So do what the documentation tells you, but I can tell you with 100% certainty that that's going to change because it's different from everything else they're doing. This field can either be required or not required. I'll say that it's required. The placeholder for this first one is going to be the service name. So what service do you want? And then value, we don't do things like that. We're not going to say a value in there. And I will show you how we do that, but let's go see what it looks like first. So now instead of stuff here, it says service name, which is cool. Still a lot of things I want to kind of like fix. So there's some formatting things going on here that I don't like. So for example, it's not centered. So I'd like to fix that. I'm also going to need a lot more of them. So there's still a lot to do. Let's play with adding more of them next. So we're going to have a service, and then we're going to have a username, and then we're going to have a password. So I'll just go ahead and put these things in here. So username, and then password. Technically, username is not required, so I'm going to take him out, and I'm going to see what this looks like. So now I've got this, and whoa, went from bad to worse, right? And so they're all kind of like in line here. So I got to do something to start fixing these things. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my buddy Angular Flex layout, and I'm going to see if I can fix things up. So the first thing I need to do is I need to say that this thing is a column. So I'm just going to save that off and see what difference that made. So now when I hit plus, you can see that it's looking a lot better. It defaulted to kind of stretching them to full width. I didn't really need it stretched to full width, so maybe I'll play with the layout align feature. And since it's a column, the main direction is going down. It's going to stretch in that direction, so I'm just going to say none, which just does no flex things on that. But in the other direction, I'm going to say center, and I'm going to see what that looks like. And so now hopefully they're all kind of centered. Didn't really work. And the reason it didn't really work, you could figure these things out, is because it filled up the entire space of the dialog content. But you can see that the dialog content didn't take up the whole thing. So again, you got to get better with your flex layout here. So as a child, I want him to flex. And so we can go ahead and see if this does what we want. If it doesn't, we'll fix it, right? And so now we click on this, and it's like, oh man, it went from bad to worse. So these are games that you have to play. And the problem is that FX flex is a rule that's a child rule, but my parent is not necessarily a flex box, right? And so my parent is the dialog, and I have no idea who my parent is. What I want to add, though, is I actually want this whole thing to be my form. So this is going to work out well for me. I'm going to put on a form here. And then my form is actually going to be my parent now. So my whole thing is a form. And if I want my parent to have some flex rules as well, he can also do things as a column. And this is going to work out really badly. Just going to warn you up front here. But whenever you click on it, it went away, right? So, you got to try to figure out what on earth is going on with these different things. And so this is kind of how CSS works. Sometimes you know exactly what you're doing. Sometimes you're just kind of guessing on things. If you take off the fact that the form is a flexbox at all, now all of a sudden it looks like this. And you've got to kind of try to figure things out. And don't be surprised whenever you're working on your own if you do things kind of like this. I'll show us how to fix this one though. All right, I'm not going to lie to you, that one took me a little while to figure out what was wrong. So I kept clicking it, and it was just showing up nothing here, but I figured out the problem. So I think I've got it how I want it now. So I like having a column on the form. I like having a flex on this guy, but the problem is that flex has rules for grow, shrink, and bias is what they're called. And by just saying flex, you're getting some default, but not really the default you wanted. So what you need to do is you need to say flex equals something. To be honest, you can say anything in here, and then it will change from the default such that its shrink property won't cause it to shrink. So that is the fix that I wanted to do for that. There are a couple different ways you could have done it, but I think that just giving a value for flex here is really the right thing to do. Another thing that I'd like to do is I'd kind of like for these two save and cancel buttons not to be on this side. I want them to be on the other side. And so we can do things like that as well. Again, you can look in the online guides to try to figure out what you should try to do. So where's the online thing? But we want them to shoot over to the end. And so it's just end is what we want to say on the horizontal direction. So these two guys we want to put on an FX layout align of end. And then for the cross direction, I don't really care about the cross direction, but I'll just say center. And hopefully that will shoot those save and cancel buttons over to that side, which is great. You could also use center if you prefer the center look, but I think this is how I want it. Great, so I think my HTML looks pretty good now. Let's sneak a couple more things in just because we're here. And what I want to sneak in is I want to sneak in some of the form stuff. And so forms, let's just go glance at our module. You can see that we should have brought in the forms module as one of the things that we did earlier, so we can do things with forms now. And what I want to do is I want to have this input and this input and this input all be connected with a model object. So what I need to do is in my TypeScript, I need to create a model object. I'll just call it my form password. And my form password is of type password. So I'll have to import that, of course. And then what I want to do is I can do this in the constructor. I can do it anywhere else. I just want to say this.form password equals new password. And this is one of the advantages of having a class is that you can just say new password and it knows what fields are in a password and it just makes them. If you had an interface, you would have to actually put like, curly brace, service equals blank, username equals blank, or colon blank, password colon empty string. But with a class, you do get that advantage. So we typed all that code and we got a little benefit out of it. So I just thought I'd point that out on this end. And then what you need to do to connect it on this side is each of these inputs, we're going to stick on a couple things. We're going to stick on a name. Whenever you use this forms trick, I shouldn't call it a trick, the forms module, all of your inputs have to have a name. It's just one of the requirements. To be honest, I don't know what the name is used for. It's used under the hood, but you do still have to have it. The next thing you want to do is what we did last time. So I guess we've done all this with movie quotes, is to use an ng model, which is the banana in the box, to say what it's connected to. And this is going to be connected to our form password. The service field is what it's going to be connected to. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag this and put it on all of them. And then this one, of course, changes to username, and it's connected to the form password username. And then this last one is the password property. I love that there's a password property on the password object. That's fine. The next thing I want to do is I want to actually submit things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to this form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make the save button be a submit button. So now it's going to submit this form. And then it's going to call ng submit. And I'm going to have that call a function. I'm just going to use onSubmit. I've used that in the past. I'll just do it again. Another thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to have the submit button or the save button be disabled until the required fields have stuff in them. That's just how I prefer to do things. You'll get some things for free. Let's just go ahead and see what it looks like right now when you try to submit. I should make an onSubmit function just because I get really mad if there's no onSubmit function. I want to say, to do submit. All right, now it's enough to where I can try it out. So if I click on this guy and I say, Dave, and I say 1, I say 2, and I hit save, and you can see that it says to do submit the form, but really like nothing else happened, right? If I change this to 333, I hit save, really nothing else happens. If I take off the password and I hit save, you can see that it's still actually submitting. even though there's no password. And we need to try to work on that. So let's go ahead and add that next. And this is a trick where we say, hey, this form, it's not just any old form, this is my password form. If I do this, it's going to connect to the HTML element, the form, but what I really want to connect to is the underlying ng form, which is something that is built in because of Angular material. No, it's not Angular material, it's built in because of Angular. An Angular thing has an ng form. And then you can do things like use that reference in other places. So for example, in the submit button, we can decide if it's disabled or not based on whether the password form is valid. And I think that works to say .valid, but I think you can also say .form.valid. Once upon a time I learned to put in the extra .form and it seems to work. So now if you bring it up, you can notice that there's no save button, so clicking it doesn't do squat until you have a password and a service. Interestingly, you can save it without a username. That's okay, but you do have to have a password and a service. We probably ought to also make this dialog box go away, kind of like cancel does. There's two ways we could do that. We could put this MD dialog close attribute on the button. That would be fine. There's really nothing wrong with that. And then the other thing we could do is we could actually put it programmatically in here. And what that code looks like is it needs something called the dialog ref. And the dialog reference, we can just use dependency injection to get a dialog reference. But the dialog reference lets you do various tasks like programmatically closing the dialog. And the way this works is you say MD dialog ref and you say what is it to, and this is kind of a weird thing, but it's a dialog reference for the password dialog component, which is kind of a funny thing. I do my import here, and the import is to @Angular material. So to programmatically close something, you need the dialog reference, and on the dialog reference you need to call close. And so now it should close it. Let's also go ahead and print out the form that we're going to be submitting, so this .form password. So now it should be have all the pieces that. So if I try this out, I click here and I say ABC 1 2 3 DEF, and I hit save. Close the dialog, and it shows me the password I'm going to submit. Great. So I think that looks good enough for now. So this is the dialog, HTML, and form. So what we want to do next time is we want saving it to actually get pushed to Firebase, and we'll worry about that next time. All right, see you then. Bye.